Hey, what's going on, guys? Taxation is theft. Someone posted about UBI today, asking what is LP Texas's position on UBI. And this comes up a lot. Interesting enough, there's a lot of pro-UBI people in the libertarian movement. A lot of them supported Andrew Yang. It baffles me, but this is what I want to say on that. I'm sure you've heard me talk about the New American Dream before. But this is the thing. The government steals from us every year. Every year we earn $8.5 trillion, and every year the government takes from us $7.5 trillion. We're being taxed at 88%. Of course, it doesn't seem like 88% because they take 30% out of our paycheck, 10% here, 20% there. We don't realize it, but they're taking 88% of our income. Now, here's the thing. We can fix a lot of this simply by eliminating a lot of taxes and the FHA. These are some of the, what I call life taxes. There are taxes on our very existence. There's property tax. There's income tax. These are, if you said, hey, screw it, I don't want anything to do with this system, then basically what you've got is, okay, I want to go live on some land in the middle of nowhere, grow my own food, make my own community, and that's it, and that's fine. But the government still comes along and says, well, even though you have nothing to do with society, even though you don't have a job, even though you don't use money, you still have to pay a property tax. Also, because of the FHA, that land is going to be very expensive to acquire, because what the FHA does is they make banks give out money that they don't have, more money that they don't have, more money than they would normally give out that they don't have, because the government is insuring it. So the FHA basically floods the real estate market with lots of money so that land and property becomes a lot more expensive. So you eliminate that, property prices come down, and I'll talk about that in a second because I know that sounds horrible to a lot of people. Property prices come down, taxes go down, which means your mortgages go down, which means if you're landlording, your rent can go down. And people, I'll get to that in a second. And people say, oh, do you think just lowering their taxes, they're going to lower their rent? Yes. I'll explain that in a minute. But we eliminate a lot of these life taxes, and ultimately what this does is this means you spend less money keeping a roof over your head, and you start saving money. You start building a future for yourself and for your family. And I want to talk about, I don't know how much time I've got, but I want to talk about generational wealth also. But let me first start with, I said I was going to go back to the FHA and property prices going down. This scares a lot of people, right? Because they bought a lot of property and they're like, oh, well, I don't want property prices to go down. I put all this money here, right? Okay, here's the thing. There's a way out of it. But first of all, the premise is absolutely ridiculous. The premise is that real estate will always go up. It will always be worth more. Well, if it's worth $1 tomorrow, $1 more tomorrow, and $1 more the next day, basically what that means is for the rest of time, the value, the dollar number that you put on that property is always going to be going up. That means at some point in the future, the crappiest little dump in the crappiest little city, no offense to anybody who thinks they live there, is going to be worth $100 billion. And if we can stop inflation, which we need to do, that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't add up. So there's two things here that we have to consider. One is that inflation is driving up the cost of housing, and inflation we can stop. And the other is scarcity, which has its limits. If everybody's trying to pile into New York, yeah, some places in New York might be worth $100 billion. But that doesn't mean that some places out in the country are going to be worth that much also. And that's a majority of the houses. Remember, half of America lives in outside of incorporated areas, not even in cities. And even within cities, you have a lot of smaller cities where the real estate is not that expensive. So this whole premise is an illusion, but you do have a lot of people that bought into this illusion. They bought these houses with the expectation that they're going to be able to charge rent forever. And of course, if you're getting people out of the renting mentality and getting them into property ownership, they're not going to be renting anymore. So now all these landlords own these houses, and they're really pissed off. Why would all these people with money support a plan like this? Because there's a way out. So first of all, it's a house of cards. It's going to fall. It's going to fall. It doesn't matter how or when or why. It could be another collapse like 2008. It's going to fall. But there's a safe way out of it for anybody who bought into this, right? Rent to own. It's already a thing. There's already rent to own. Now, with rent to own, what happens is somebody owns a house. They put a renter in there. They charge them a little bit more. They agree on a sale price. And the renter basically starts buying the house back from them. And they can establish payments that are just like if they had bought a house from a bank. The only difference is they don't need a huge down payment. And it's not because the landlord is creating money out of thin air. It's because the landlord says, hey, I'm managing a couple properties. If you don't make good on your payments, I can evict you and put somebody else in there. The risk is very low. A bank doesn't like doing that because they don't like managing properties. And so if you don't pay your mortgage and they have to kick you out, they take the house back and they put it up for auction and they potentially lose money. Of course, the government takes care of that by insuring it, but that's another story. So rent to own. With rent to own, essentially what happens is you're paying more rent, but you're getting equity. And ultimately, what that could mean to a seller is that they're getting more for that house than what the house is worth if they just did a regular sale. Because you're not just selling it and getting rid of it, you're still maintaining it and renting it for several years before the buyer takes it over. So a lot of people look at this as, okay, you buy a house for, let's say, $100,000, and then 5 years later, you have to sell it for $50,000 because the market tanked. Oh my God, you lost all that money. But think about this. If you rented that property out for 10 years and then sold it for $50,000, you actually made a lot of money because you have to consider all the income that you took in rent. So let's say you spent $100,000, you sell it for $50,000. Yeah, you're selling it at a loss, but maybe you also collected $50,000 or $100,000 in rent over several years. Now consider this. It's not going to be that much if those people have to pay taxes on it. So of course they're going to hold on to that property, and of course they're going to hold on to this idea that we have to inflate the market to keep the prices up so they don't just totally lose their ass in the market. So we have to get rid of these taxes. And I know poor people are like, oh my God, no, you want to help the rich. No, that's not what this is about at all. You get the rich to stop worrying about artificially inflating their housing prices and their rents. And what happens is they start lowering their rents and they start offering more properties for you to rent to own. Which ultimately means more poor people start owning homes. And when more poor people start owning homes, that means you're not wasting your money on rent. You're saving, you're building a future for your family. And I want to talk about that for a second. I'm almost where I'm going. So I might have to cut this short. But saving for your future, because a lot of people say, oh yeah, well those kids grew up rich. They never had to work for anything and they don't deserve it. Okay, they grew up rich. Did their parents grow up rich? Not always. Sometimes you have people who work really, really hard to save up a lot of money so that their kids don't have to go through the same struggle that they went through. You could do that for your own kids. In fact, it would be stupid if you didn't do that for your own kids. Buy a house that you don't have to pay taxes on, just like those rich assholes. Earn a lot of money that you don't have to pay taxes on, just like those rich assholes. So when you have kids, they're not struggling through life. They're not jumping right into the workforce, working 60 hours a week to put food on your table so that they can't go to college, they can't go to school, and they miss all these other opportunities. Don't do that. Provide for them. Give them something. Give them something that they can inherit without having to give up because the taxes are too high on it. That's what happens. A lot of people in this country owned property. There are a lot of poor people in this country whose parents and grandparents and great-grandparents owned a lot of property and a lot of wealth, and it's all been taxed away. That means these people who are now poor would have been living in a house that they inherited from generations. Maybe not even a house, maybe land, maybe farmland. There are plenty of families who have been kicked off of farms because of taxes. This is not about saving the rich. This is about saving every American. So think about all this stuff. There was another point I wanted to get back to, but I gotta run. I'm where I'm going, but taxation is theft. I'll follow up with this later. See ya.